So, hello everyone, welcome back. Welcome to the third day of our conference, Sailing Under False Colors. I'm Fabian Saavedra-Lara, I'm the director of the medienwerk.nrw office. I have the pleasure to give a warm welcome to our panelists, to Melanie Bühler, which will be the moderator of today's session, Boundless Digital Worlds. And I'd like to say a few words about Melanie. Melanie Bühler is a freelance curator, a critic and a writer. She's based in Amsterdam. She's the director of the Lunch Bites Initiative, which is a series of discussions, talks, lectures. She cooperated for these lectures with several institutions. It's also connected to an online platform on digital art and culture. She cooperated with institutions such as Art Basel, CCA Glasgow, ICA in London, the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden, Washington, D.C., among others. As a curator, her most recent projects include Inflected Objects #1, Abstraction, Rising, Automated Reasoning at Swiss Institute in Milano, Surface Poetry at Botsela, Nispen, Amsterdam, and Brand's Concept Affect Modularity at Salz Project Space in Birsfelden. So give a warm welcome to our panel. Thanks, Melanie, for hosting us, for hosting the session, and I'll hand it over to you. Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you very much, Fabian. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks to class as well for the excellent organization. It's been a pleasure to be here in Essen at the Ruhrgebiet for the first time, actually. So this panel is entitled Boundless Digital Worlds. And in this panel, we will address boundaries, binaries, and categories that inform and shape the field of art and digital culture. Lately, there has been much debate on where the digital and its network, the internet, belongs. Its status and impact, especially in the field of art, have been much discussed. According to the American architect and theorist Keller Easterling, the internet has left the box. Hito Steil, on the other side, declared it dead already a while ago. And many critics and theorists have argued that our present moment could be described as post-digital. In the art world, the term post-internet was introduced, aiming to point to artistic practices that deal with the internet and digital technologies in a distinct, contemporary manner, moving beyond the internet as a novelty. These statements and tendencies all seem to destabilize the digital as a category. They share the assumption that digital networked technologies have become ubiquitous, banal, invisible, to the point where they can be declared non-existent. This leaves us with the question of what has happened to digital art as a category within the field of visual art, and how this shifting perception of the digital has informed, if at all, the institutional setting and the way art that deals with digital technologies is handled, shown, and funded. The question thus arises how institutions have responded to an evolving digital field in a time when medium specificity seems outdated, as contemporary forms of art making are stressing the fluidity between digital and analog stages. Artwork conceived as digital files are transformed into physical sculptures to be photographed and dispersed on the internet again, resulting in a back and forth between different media and materialities. The approach of staying true to your medium that was palpable in early net art seem to have been given up. Works originally conceived in and dealing with a networked setting are now shown in gallery spaces as matter of facts. Hans Bernhard, one of the founding members of the artist group Übermorgen, that was founded in the mid-90s, will address precisely this tension, and Hans is sitting at the outer edge of our setting. So he will address precisely this tension. He will discuss the relation between work that exists online only and work shown in gallery spaces, which will also lead him to address how commerce and activism relate to each other in the practice of Übermorgen. The London and Berlin-based artist Cécile B. Evans, whose work Agnes is also on view here at PACT, will talk about a related topic. Taking her practice as a case in point, the artist will argue against a binary relation between physical and digital, or material and immaterial. A dichotomy that has been present in the discourse around art and digital culture ever since the emergence of the field. Zooming out again, Michel Kasprzak, who is sitting right next to me, who was just up until very recently curator at B2 and is now a curator and writer and professor at the Piet Zwart Institute in Rotterdam, based in Amsterdam. We'll talk more broadly about the different names and labels that structure the field. She will address the emergence of labels such as post-internet and the digital as a category, and ask how these affect and shape the reality of the field. Paul Feigelfeld, who is sitting right there, academic coordinator of the Digital Cultures Research Lab at the Center for Digital Cultures at Leuphana University Lüneburg, on the other hand, will allude to the status of the digital in our lives more broadly. He will address a tendency towards a growing invisibility of digital devices and discuss the perception of digital space more broadly. And with that, I would like to give it to Hans, from whom we will hear first. We will hear short presentations. You can, of course, always ask questions, and then we will engage in a panel discussion.
Okay, thanks for the invite. It's great to be here. It's great to see some old friends and make some new friends. For me, I've been dealing with the transformation of digital work into physical space for about 10 years. Before that, we didn't care. We just wanted to be pop stars and entertainers, and it didn't matter. Art was not an issue. And now, for about 2 years, I'm very much sure that this, what was an ideological imperative, basically, by, I don't know whom, maybe someone of you can answer that to me. This digital divide, this separation between the digital and the material or the physical. I don't believe it in it anymore. I don't think there is a separation. I see it with my kids. I see it with myself. I see it everywhere. I see it in my practice. So this is a piece we've shown. There's some images coming now from a show in 2013, Carol Fletcher Gallery in London. This is a router, and there is old web art on it. And the router is hacked. It's an idea by Aram Bartol, a German artist. The router is basically adapted, so you can show, you get the Wi-Fi and you call the Wi-Fi the name of the artwork, and you can look at it on your device, on your tablet or your smartphone. Oh, I'm too inactive. Could you tell me the password? Sorry. Oh, is it your laptop? Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
In a second.
Sorry. Okay, I have to move. Yeah, so this is
There you go.
So basically this router, for me it represents also the cloud. And the cloud, I'm a total fan of the internet as a material thing. There's a wonderful book you should all read, it's called Tubes. It just explains the physicality. It's all physics, it's all material, it's all machines, it's all cables. So this is a wonderful piece because it's a unique piece. It's wonderful as an artist as well. I can make a unique piece plus one AP. So it can stay online, what it was supposed to, it's a work maybe for 20 years, it's online, and it's still reachable, and everybody can see it. Yeah, we don't have to sell this piece, but we can sell this router where there is a copy, or whatever it is, yeah, of this online. So basically for me, I think as an artist, I create a channel into your mind, and then I send data. It can be a story, a sculpture, a software. We're all users. It doesn't matter in which form it is. I don't care. This installation is called, you can read, do you think that's funny? Because that's a question we got asked many times during our period where we did more actionism, more online performances. Journalists would call us up and think, do you think that's funny what you're doing? So we took this for a new piece, 2013. It's based on a story where we met Edward Snowden in Vienna at the airport, and he was then sent back to Russia, but we had the chance to talk to him. There's also a gallery publication where this dialogue is printed, and then later on he sent us some files, and they are on this, there's a redundant system, there's 2 beagle bones, and they're basically the files. That was my vision, is that that you store material, digital material, not on hard drives or in RAM, but in cables. So everything becomes liquid, like cash, like money. Yeah? It just flows. I mean, money is supposed to flow. That's why I'm always broke. I get money and I spend it because it's supposed to go in and out and flow. You have to do things with it. The same with data or information or ideas. Yeah? That's why I say fuck copyright, where we don't. This is a stupid idea. And this is it's part of a room installation where we got 4 machines with tails on it. That's like an amnesia operating system. And the human being in the installation is represented by these bottles of how's it called, this hacker drink, mate. Yes, exactly. So it's basically the human being is there. Yeah. So this installation is everything. It could be just a story or an idea or a concept. It's an installation, as you see. It's high tech at the same time. It's a classical video art setting that was really important for me to put this plinth or this bench, so people understand that they have to sit down, or they can sit down and actually watch the technology and the data flow within these devices. It's also software encryption, and also it's surveillance. So there was a surveillance system along with it, because we were expecting the MI5 or Scotland Yard to enter the gallery, and we wanted this recorded and then make another piece out of it. It never happened. They did it with The Guardian, but I don't know. So this is another piece. It's been shown at the, oh God, I've got 2 minutes. That's crazy. It's been shown in Aarhus at the Kunsthal. It's a software piece where we create books out of YouTube user comments. And it's a machine that collects the YouTube, you can enter a video, it collects, it spiders out, and it takes the comments and it turns them into books. And the diagram is basically a print machine which is adapted to how it actually works, the software actually works. And these 2 tons of paper, which is very physical, it took me 3 days to staple it perfectly and to arrange it perfectly, then create these books, these 200 red books. So, talking about selling this kind of art, so you could sell the installation, but that's a museum thing. You have to sell it to a museum, and it's also very difficult because you have to, every time you show it, you have to print the 2 tons of paper again because they're not very good and you can't really handle them, etc. So in the end, for me, selling, I don't believe in the original, or I don't believe in copies. I think it's all irrelevant. In the end, it works very well. I think there's not a question we have to discuss a lot how to deal with it. We just sell certificates. It doesn't matter. I don't care. So, yeah, this is a makeup software. My kids, they play around and they make these beautiful women. And then we use the Oldify software, an application for the iPhone or the Android. And we make these beautiful girls, very old. And then Bliss paints over it, pixel by pixel. And here the point is that the machine is merely a crutch. It's basically painting, but it's very hard to communicate. Okay, my 10 minutes are over. I'll just finish this and then I'll give the floor to someone else, to the next speaker, to you. So here my idea was that we would need a machine, a computer, a screen that is 200 by 150 centimeters to actually design it, to work like a painter. Because you have to go and do stuff, and then you have to go back and look at it. So Liz, my partner in Übermorgen, which is the art collective for artists who I work in, she's a true genius because she can abstract the painting. It costs a lot of money to produce a painting like that, to print it, to frame it, to ship it to London. It's enormous cost involved. So if she fucks it up, we can not show it. We can throw it away. So, yeah, I will. I'll touch the other topics in the discussion, and I thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me. I thought I'd just start with a video work that I finished this October, which has been shown in a few different ways, but this is one of them. So the video that you see in the back is called Hyperlinks or It Didn't Happen. And then there are several sculptures, prints, portraits, a performance on the computer that the audience can kind of navigate as they will. This is a trailer, but I think it's too long. But Hyperlinks or It Didn't Happen essentially told the story of a group of immaterial agents on their search for meaning. So these immaterial agents who, as the video goes on, you find out have very material consequences on their and the real world as their different storylines kind of collapse and converge and interweave through a structure called a hyperlinked cinema structure, kind of like the movie Magnolia. So this is Haku. She is a holographic pop star sent from Japan to Dubai. You also kind of encounter legions of lost women, forgotten by time, but mostly history, including the computer girls, who were the programmers for the ENIAC and the Colossus, the first digital computers. You meet a render ghost who's trapped in a Japanese living pod, an invisible woman who's been erased from a landscape, as well as her partner, and their storyline is kind of linked to Ralph Ellison's tale of the Industrial Revolution and the African-American worker, also called the Invisible Man. And you also meet Agnes, but I'll tell you a bit about her in a second. So I mentioned this video because it was narrated by a failed CGI copy that I made of a recently deceased actor. And when I received the prompt for this discussion, I thought I would kind of disclose one of the early email exchanges that I had with a render person that I was discussing to actually make this failed CGI copy. And this email kind of divulges towards the end of our conversations that he was unable to work with me because he lives in Egypt, and because of the current political situation, there was no way for me to pay him. And this for me is something that kept kind of popping up along the process and was kind of the most concrete example of a lack, this idea of these boundless situation and these binaries between the virtual, which is meant to mean fake, and the physical. They just don't exist. Many of the same problems are there, and we have to deal with them. In the mainstream, this has also manifested itself in the exposure of Jeff Bezos of Amazon's Mechanical Turks, who are workers from which you can order tasks like inputting data, cleaning up algorithms. In the beginning, they were presented as artificial intelligences almost, and it's begun to emerge that these were all people who were being paid very small amounts of money, sometimes 7 cents per task. Interesting to me is that he got the name Mechanical Turk from an 18th century automaton. It was meant to be a chess-playing automaton, also called a Mechanical Turk, which was really just a failed chess champion sat inside of a box. So interesting that he would choose that. Something that I would say I enjoy to do is to kind of go to different customer service websites and talk to their bots that they've enacted, and over time have been revealed just to be another call center. And this is me having a conversation with Edward and just kind of asking him different questions about his work life, and also how many people treat him as though he's a bot, which he says is many. And this became a performance eventually in which I set up a chat platform where audiences could speak with Phil, the narrator of the video. And what was not revealed was that this also was a call center of about 6 performers who were given a script, but also allowing for moments of chance and experience. So there is a certain level of automation, especially with emotions, in these algorithms that are made, although never usually indicated that these algorithms are still defined by people. This is a quote from the CEO of a corporation called Affectiva, and she says that their technology, which is meant to detect emotions, define them, and analyze them, will tell you about emotions that even you don't know that you have. And I happened to see this quote earlier, and she went on a bit longer and described that her example for this was her young daughter, which I find amazing because I have no idea what children are thinking half the time. Going even further back, I started a conversation with a software company that also says that they can detect lies, but also love and your very true emotions. They now work for the Israeli military as a lie detector and to see how people are feeling as they enter and exit the airport. GCHQ, which is the NSA of the UK, they also in 2011 discovered that there was an important influence in cyberspace, something that Facebook's platform is entirely based on. This idea that emotions are contagious and they can develop algorithms that actually increase engagement. And the more you engage, of course, the more that they're able to make money and add revenues and the like. So as an artist, how do you deal with all of these things as this information comes in? And kind of my way of doing so, and a version of this project is here with Agnes, but it originally started as an online digital commission from the Serpentine Galleries, curated by Ben Vickers. And Agnes is a spam bot who lives on the Serpentine Galleries webpage, and through your interactions with her, so basically through your clicks and the way that you answer certain questions, she wants to know or needs to know more about your thoughts and feelings, really highlighting this exchange but also being explicit. And one of the other things that was amazing about working with this institution in particular is they allowed me to open up themselves. So Agnes would also share information about the institution. Here is a user journey, which is just the path that the user goes on with Agnes, in which case you can select an employee, and then through things that you continue on, she gives you information about them, very personal information, like their first kiss, whether or not they like their job, what they do. Another thing that was important, so that this project stayed really in the realm of the user's expectations, as opposed to me revealing kind of what the technology behind it was or how Agnes functions, was for her to do her own interviews. So this happened a number of times, but this example was the first one, which is the director of the Serpentine Galleries, Hans-Ulrich Obrist, interviewing Agnes for art papers. On another user journey, another way of opening up kind of the institution was that Agnes would attempt to find out information about the user to match them with a particular artist within the exhibition's archives. And as it got further along, basically if you were anything other than a white male, she couldn't find something. She didn't have enough information in the database, so she would very literally send the user a token in the mail. So these are tweets of people receiving their tokens. So the piece that's being shown here was originally an invitation from the Kunstverein Munich, and they wanted to show it within the spaces, and so I came up with this idea that Agnes has heard that there will be an end to her as an online commission. So the video that you see is her kind of working through that, and it's streamed off of streamed live from a server, and I see I'm running out of time. But basically, after that happened, the Serpentine then invited her back for a live performance where she got to confront the curator, Ben Vickers, in front of an audience about these, this situation that was happening, and also taking questions from the audience about, just things that they wanted to know. And important for me was to also establish this, once again, to reinforce between kind of what we would normally call the both spaces, but I call one space of the physical and the digital. They got their money back. At the end, she sort of said, I'm well aware that you are here to give me something, so she gave them their £5 note. I'll just end on this, which is to say, kind of everything is encapsulated in this fact that I wouldn't say that the work is about technology as a medium. It's more about technology as a condition that's very much happening to us. And what's most exciting about working with institutions is when they realize that technology is not some kind of utopic convention that will somehow make their institution more relevant, but the opportunity to create new platforms that address the things that are happening today. Thanks.
I always have to lower the mic. Such a shorty. Anyways, thanks for inviting me, and I wanted to talk a little bit about labels today. What's in a name, you could say. How do we label ourselves, and does it matter? Because of course there are increasingly blurry boundaries between artists and designers, process and product, amateur and professional, and then we end up with these tags, these labels that are often very helpful for the market. So the YBAs, this became a thing, which helped them sell a lot of artwork, and post-internet is also another label that enables people to feel like they have a community or makes it more market-friendly. But first I want to dial it back a bit to Andy Warhol, actually, which is where a lot of things begin. The Andy Warhol Archive in Pittsburgh, can I move this pointer? Yes, I can. Plays host to basically everything that he ever owned, including 610 boxes referred to as time capsules, these boxes. Our late Uncle Andy had a habit of just basically sweeping everything off of his desk and putting it into the box, sealing it up, dating it, and putting it aside, never to open it again. And some very strange things have been found in these boxes. A mummified foot, an entire birthday cake, pizzas, several pizzas, in fact. So, you kind of wonder, this is, very strange, but again, it was just a desk sweep. Also at the Glenn Gould Archive in Ottawa, in Canada, they have boxes and boxes filled with all of his trademark caps and gloves and all the hotel keys that he ever pinched from the hotels he stayed at during his concert career. Yeah. Of the items in Warhol's boxes, the director of the Andy Warhol Museum says that everything in his life and an artist's life was meritorious of recollection. I wonder if it is. I speculate, of course, that I would gain no insight into Warhol's practice from being able to handle an old pizza that he never consumed and then put into a box. And I also similarly doubt that seeing Glenn Gould's key collection would tell me much about his character, though I might notice what hotel chain he preferred. But this marks perhaps the beginning in contemporary times of the cult of the artist. It existed before, but distinctive players like Andy and Glenn make it extra and potent. And then there are the conditions, of course, of today, of right now. Boris Groys, one of my favorite fellows, says, earlier the figure of the artist was hidden behind his or her works. Today such a strategy is impossible. The artist is a public figure and the primary object of contemporary art. So his ultimate goal is self-design. I speak about the autopoetics as a practice of self-objectification. The problem is not how to become a subject, but how to become an object. For example, how to become an object for the algorithmic gaze of Google. Now, in the 70s, Linda Nochlin wrote the wonderful essay, Why Have There Been No Great Women Artists? And in it, she pinpoints the underpinning of the current star artist curator system that we have today, the myth of the lone genius, which of course keeps getting proven again and again to be just a myth. There are whole conferences devoted to the power of collaboration. There are now all kinds of team members, usually women and minorities, becoming credited with projects that were often given over to just one person for so long. And recent research by Joshua Wolfshank also posits that perhaps the pair is the most potent creative unit. But so no one is going to bat for the lone genius anymore, and for good reason. As Nochlin says, it is this sort of mythology about artistic achievement and its concomitants which forms the unconscious or questioned assumptions of scholars, no matter how many crumbs are thrown to social influences, ideas of the times, economic crises, and so on. Basically, so there's this golden nugget theory of genius and of individual achievement, which is completely bonkers and bogus because we're all products of our time and our environment. And as Groys just said, anyways, the artist is now making themselves a product, so this is where we are. Now, 30 years after this essay was published, curator Steve Dietz wrote, Why Have There Been No Great Net Artists? Using her essay as an inspiration to discuss the marginalized status of net art in the institution at the time. He also addresses the star artist issue by talking about how the network actively produces changed roles. So on the net, collaboration is not the exception that proves the rule. There's all of these different roles, programmer, designer, and it's unusual to have a single artist who does everything on a given project. The star model is not only being bust open by new theories positing these things, but it's also that the tools that are available to everyone, I mean, the iPhone has more power than the first NASA space shuttle. These are amazing tools. This is kind of amazing. I mean, this is, you stop to think about it and what you have in your hand and how truly powerful it is, as often as you might curse at it, of course, when it's not working. But But Groys again says, today nobody contemplates, everybody creates. We've moved from mass consumption of art to its mass production. People permanently address the global audience by placing their texts, videos, photos on the internet. That means their attitude towards art is not aesthetic, but rather poetic. They're interested not in how to look at things, but how to produce them. And in a way, I was a product of this kind of system. I'm trained as an artist at a former polytechnical school that turned to university in Canada. I took one art history class, and the rest of the time I was busy learning how to hand code HTML and program Macromedia Director in a program called The New Media, which kind of, anyway, gives you a sense of how old I am. And my own students today are similarly geared towards learning how to use the laser cutter more than anything else, because these are kind of the perhaps new tools, and the aesthetics are baked in. They come with part of the community. But back to post-internet art. Digital natives are used to collaboration, of course, focusing on tools, but they're still, according to one critic, used to the validation of the gallery and the museum. Post-internet art is in love with advertising, like a lot of art since Warhol, but it's the obsession with the art world power systems, as represented by the installation shot, that irks me most about it. After a century witnessing art in newspapers, on the radio, in the mail, on television, and on the internet, there's a self-styled avant-garde that's all about putting art back in the rarefied space of the gallery, even as it purports to offer profound insights about how a vast, non-hierarchical communications network is altering our lives. So, yeah, maybe this title is important, post-internet, as a marketing handle, but for this generation in love with advertising, selfie, and all things narcissistic, becomes kind of a vicious circle. This is what happens when you Google post-internet art. This is what kind of things that comes up. Just thought I would provide that as an interlude to all that text. Interlude, yes. But there's no question, Steve Dietz says, now I'm going back another 30 years, there's no question that such categorization is useful, especially in a distributed system like the internet. Here he was talking about when they were attempting to categorize net art things by different modes of creation, etc. But in truth, to paraphrase Barnett Newman, ornithology is for the birds what categorization is for the artist. Perhaps especially at a time of rapid change and explosive growth of the underlying infrastructure and tool sets, it's critical that description follow practice and not vice versa. The term rapid change is on everyone's lips and has been for decades now, obviously. It used to be kind of cool to be a member of the contemporary art circuit and pretend that you really had no idea about computers. Hands up if you went to Venice even 10 years ago and people were fumbling with their phone and acting like, oh, I don't know how this works. It was perfectly acceptable. Yeah, you're laughing because it happened to you. Today's leading lights of the commercial gallery world are now forced to have opinions on these things but of course, predictably, they start to miss the point a little bit because they're kind of getting caught up with what Steve Dietz was talking about 30 odd years ago. This is Jessica Bradley, a gallerist who's about to shut her gallery in Canada. She just said in an interview recently published, one of the huge changes in the last decade was that we all entered the convenience of the digital exchange of images, and art fairs increasingly became an itinerant marketplace, allowing one-stop looking and shopping. Of course, there couldn't be a worse way of looking at or engaging with art. There is a diminishment of people going to galleries. Many critics have written about this. It's an exponential change. Couldn't be a worse way. Wow, that's pretty harsh, Jessica. This flattening of production, but also of distribution, is of course bad news for a traditional gallerist who is trying to make it in what she admits is a small market, Canada. There are ways to sell online, but as new media artist Jan Robert Lake said, I'd rather sell 100 copies for $1,000 copies for $1 than one work for $1,000, which sums up the model of making money in the kind of app marketplace and digital realm quite well. Though maybe the post-internet crowd and their obsession with the installation shot are onto something, because I know that while it's heresy for a curator to express interest in something without having seen it installed, good documentation beats a bad in-situ experience every time. Did anybody ever, while you're there in Venice with the giggling people that don't know how to use Twitter, did you ever see anything properly in that preview week? Or were you still hungover from the party the night before? Yeah. You're probably better off reading the catalog, actually. And when everyone's being a creator, there's just more to get through, and being there becomes kind of nearly impossible. There's these huge marathon exhibitions that you cannot see. They are too big to see. So deal with it. Get over it. This is from Mark Spiegler, who's the director of Art Basel, and this was from another recent interview. It's been a gold mine of recent interviews. He says, there's a lot more art out there than there used to be. A lot of it is dross, but there's still a lot of gold to be found. For example, it's only in the last 4 years, apparently, that the digital native generation has really started to catch fire. That's a whole new development in the art world that wasn't there before. People playing with the internet and digital technologies as a way of producing art and as a way of introducing new ideas and commentary into society. Mr. Spiegler, like many, have missed net art and early electronic artwork entirely and skipped straight to the more market-savvy post-internet generation. And while he's noting that there is simply more of everything, making his job as an art fair director a bit harder, there's also a recent curatorial tendency to make things even more extreme. How much more time do I have? Just check. Because this is make it more extreme. I'll just keep going. Things have, and they continue to kind of open up bit by bit, and curators are getting kind of a little more open in what they're doing, of course, and the art formerly known as new media continues to come out of obscurity despite some people coming to the party a bit late. Curators end up then putting their whole process on display. They don't want to be left out of the Andy Warhol time capsulization of their practice. Instead of restricting the show to the final artworks, they put artwork and common object side by side. So this is from a show at the Serpentine Gallery in '95 called The Maybe, where curated by Tilda Swinton and Cornelia Parker. Tilda Swinton sleeping in a glass box was one of the pieces, but also shown alongside Napoleon's rosary, one of Churchill's cigars, and as pictured here, Tilda Swinton's expired passport and a goblet thrown from the cliffs of Dover. And this, some of you may recognize, is The Brain from Documenta 13, which included objects. This was meant to map the sort of curator's brain, showing like all of the influences and things, and like Eva Braun's compact powder and a range of other objects, mapping out a partial range anyway of her thought. And additionally, there's many other examples that I could discuss, but I will simply show this now is a show curated by an artist, Mark Leckie, The Universal Addressability of Dumb Things, and this was in 2013. And it also fits this pattern, drawing attention to form and meaning without asking an artist to sanctify each object by actually creating it. So, you ask yourself, an unsigned urinal is just a urinal, right? I don't know. Anyway, so you can see, for example, he has a model of a uterus, high-heeled shoe, etc. Let's just take it all on the table and dump out the time capsule and put it in the gallery, basically. The kitchen sink approach. And in the end, the merged practices of today, I think, enhanced by the invisibility of digital processes to the digital native generation, mean that what becomes relevant is not how the creator categorizes themselves or how much of the kitchen sink approach we include or don't include. The volume is going to be ever increasing. And so at a certain point, it's not about who made what, but at what point did you invite somebody else to participate in your process? That's where I would like to leave it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation, first of all. I won't show many pictures, but I will talk about media and materiality. Media have become invisible or intangible. As our devices become more and more reduced to sheer, transparent, untouchable interfaces, it is exactly this tangibility that makes them intangible. The seemingly intuitive approach to smart technology is doing the exact opposite. It prohibits access to the technology and inhibits knowledge and understanding. It makes the mechanism intransparent while making you transparent to the companies and intelligence services. This movement towards invisibility is a convergence with what we call a black box. To contradict Kalle Easterling, who says that the internet has just left the box, the trick that is being played here, however, is that we don't even wonder what's in the box anymore, because it's not the rabbit, it's the box itself that has disappeared. And I think this is exactly what you would describe as the technological condition that we live in. Two metaphors have become to govern how we think about the internet as a social, economic, political, and legal space. The first one is one that's very ephemeral, lofty, and celestial, puffy almost, and it's called cloud computing. The second one seems dangerous and is called the darknet. The funny thing is that each means the exact opposite of what its name actually says. First of all, there is no such thing as the cloud. Cloud computing as a name, which by the way comes from most probably the bad PowerPoint skills of computer engineers when visualizing clusters of computers, is an obfuscation campaign. It's a smoke bomb. It masks a giant campaign of centralization of data that does the exact opposite of what it wants you to believe. Also, there is no such thing as immaterial communication or immaterial media. The thing that disappears behind our invisible media are giant data centers, millions of miles of cables that have a gigantic climatic, geological, biological effect that even changes landscapes. Might have heard also about the term the Anthropocene and the way that, for example, China and Africa are being mined for rare earth minerals. Great show, by the way, in Vienna recently, where many artists that we could also speak about here today addressed this and worked with rare earth minerals. Changes this way completely. The darknet at the same time is not dark at all. It is the actual open space of the internet. It is where you can determine yourself what you want to see, #NoFilter, which of course also means that all kind of illegal stuff and dangerous stuff is going on there. This brings me to the second point when we talk about post-digital or post-internet. I think the notion of something post-digital or post-internet is a very, very dangerous one insofar as it disguises the fact that the internet is really just coming of age and has stopped being a teenager. It's just beginning to grow up, and I think this is why this kind of terminology, even though people in the know who sit here probably know what it means because they followed the discourse a little bit, but in general, since it has been something that has entered pop culture also, is a very, very dangerous notion because it keeps us from actually thinking about what comes next when it comes to legislating the internet, when it comes to really think in a grown-up way about what it means to be a cultural producer or an artist or a theorist, or even just a very normal citizen in this way. And I'm talking about digital rights, I'm talking about privacy and all these kinds of things. The last part of my presentation, I would really just, because we also talked about it a little bit in the beginning, was that of course this also brings with it a very new way of objectivity. Boris Kreuz mentioned it a little bit, but also it means that we think differently about the materiality of objects and about different types of digital objects. So I want to briefly introduce the work of three artists. First one you might know is Oliver Laric, who just recently digitized or 3D scanned the whole collection of the Lincoln Museum and made the data for these 3D scans publicly available. They're all online. So you can download these sculptures and basically rebuild them yourself. So this is something that I think we should also think about when it comes to new ways of thinking about archiving and what an object actually is. The second one is a project called Material Speculation. Sorry, I have to reload. By an artist called Moresine Al-Haryari. She works with the 3D scanning company Autodesk. Sorry, this is kind of... Okay. here we go. And what she does is she's starting to create an archive of 3D scans of all the cultural heritage destroyed by ISIS. She does that with a theoretical background rooted in the work of Reza Negastani and a couple of other people. And what's then happening is, you can see it a little bit in these sculptures, maybe here in this one, that a flash drive and a memory card are stored inside the body of each 3D printed object, like time capsules. Each object will be sealed and kept for future civilizations. The information in these flash drives includes images, maps, PDF files, and videos gathered in the last months on the artifacts and sites that were destroyed. These materials were sourced by an intense research process involving contacting different archaeologists, historians, and museum staff, from British Museum to archaeologists and historians in Iraq and Iran. The documentation is provided in Persian, Arabic, and English. The last project I want to show is a project that I'm co-developing with the French artist Antoine Renard, who runs an independent space in Berlin called Center, which I highly recommend. And it's called the Zero Land. It also works with an application recently published by Autodesk called 123D Catch, which enables you to do 3D scans with your smartphone, which then you can then upload on a platform which is something that you could call an Instagram for 3D scans. So what's happening here is something that we've seen that Oliver is using, something that's connected to the museum space. It's connected to the idea of the archive and the way we think about sculptural bodies, where Morezine is doing something about cultural heritage and the idea of the destruction of history. What's happening here is that we find something that deals with a very common situation in everyday objects. So people really just start goofing around with it, scanning whatever they see fit, especially like Cody. This is also going to be the first sculpture that Antoine is going to do. So you have to imagine this is just a bunch of kids goofing around and 3D scanning themselves. But this creates a whole new different kind of digital objectivity, you might say. This one is also, you might not recognize it, but it's someone's wife in the living room holding an M16 assault rifle. And that's it, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentations. They were all very interesting, and we touched on very different topics as well. But I also identified some common concerns in all of your presentations, such as you all emphasized the materiality of the internet, not to look at it as this immaterial cloud-like structure, but something that is very material and very real. And secondly, you all seem to have said that it should be opened up in a way. It should be made transparent that actually human labor informs this structure, and this structure is humanly made. You, in Cécile's as well as Hans' as Übermorgen's project, you tackled that question in different forms. With you, Hans, I think of your media hacks, in which you, as human beings, attack a system through coding, and with you, Cécile, with projects such as Agnes, you open up that black box that you talked about, Paul, and make visible the human labor that goes into it. So if we contrast the work of Übermorgen to Cécile's work, maybe, Hans, you could talk about a little bit about these early works of yours, such as Amazon Noir and eToy, as kind of like tactics to open up a system, to break it up.
Yeah, one of the problems you have if you attack systems, we all know that, it's an old hacker problem. You optimize the system. So we had to we had to put morality aside and say, fuck it, we're going to do it anyway. Yeah, one of the things we did, mid-90s, we were dealing majorly with the corporate world, and we used affirmative strategies. It's one of the most, for me, one of the most important strategies. And then, beginning of 2000, we did vote auction, where we took over a platform where we bought and sold electoral votes during the presidential election, 2000. Yeah, that's where the question, do you think that's funny, derives from. Because people they had a hard time dealing with these attacks because they didn't understand what exactly we were doing and why we were doing it. But the major thing was the code wasn't really the thing. It's not about, it's more about the narrative. I wanted to stop using this word. Maybe someone has a better word for it. I think it's...
I'm always looking for a different word than
Yes.
this one. I haven't found one yet.
Because that's not what it is. For me, it's
Yeah.
concept, because that's what I do. I don't code, I don't design, I don't do anything. I just think about things, talk about things. It's a collective process you have to go through. And that's why it's so important. So it's experimental. So you go out, you throw a stone, and you see what happens, what comes back. User-wise, mass media-wise, technologically, idea-wise, and then you can start to play around.
Is this similar to your strategy?
I think there are different strategies. I think one thing that really interests me always is this idea of optimizing the thing to talk about the thing. So one thing that often gets brought up with just the Agnes project is the fact that I am collecting data. I've now amassed tens of thousands of users in personal information, ranging from whether they're more afraid of like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, you know, like if they want to have children or not, like, you know, some pretty deep life stuff. And then what do you do at the end of that? How does that happen?
Have you been approached by a company about
I
selling
have
that?
several companies, and I have Agnes write them back and say, how much are you going to give me? Because I have to redistribute that to my users. And I think that's what through like having Agnes do the interviews and things like that meant that then Agnes could respond to these problems, and Agnes in real time as these things happened, I could go back to the institution or whichever one I was working with at the time and saying, hey, this needs to be flagged up. And also then it feeds into other projects like hyperlinks or it didn't happen. I mean, the question that I began with from that was like, how much of these people actually is in this data, and what is the separation between the data as its own individual thing? What is that relationship? And yeah, I mean, at some point also I wanted to have a talk show where Agnes, like called Agnes and Friends, where Agnes actually invited users to come and meet their data self, that I would then composite a person and sort of confront the information that they had given. But this just seemed a bit obvious.
Mm. So, and then making the bridge to your talk, Michelle, maybe you tackled a lot of topics as well. Maybe we can first talk about the concept of the artist. You said that contemporary artists often are perceived as these genius-like figures, whereas in fact they have a whole team of coders, designers, etc. behind them. So similarly to the impetus that was palpable in Paul's talk to open up that machine as a black box, you actually open up the artist as also kind of like this structure that brings together lots of work by other people. So in which do you think that should be acknowledged more, or how should we act up on that?
Well, it'd be great to see the kind of end of a star system that's kind of served its purpose, I think. You know, we don't need any more. I don't ever need to see another Jeff Koons piece. I don't ever need to see another Damien Hirst painting. I mean, it's like there's a kind of... it's a brand, and there's a limit to the usability of that brand or the value of that brand beyond what the art market has created as a sort of inflated thing, you know. And once the pin goes into that, I mean, the art market is the hugest unregulated market in the world. So, you know, there's like it's too big to fail. Also, in a way, I mean, there are too many rich people that own this stuff, so it's never going to go away. But what's nice is to see something like what Paul presented at the end, like this beautiful image that I love, that's what's sitting above our heads as we're having this conversation, this woman with this gun that you can't even, I thought you were going to say it was a ukulele, to be honest, actually. But it's, you know, this really, like, and to see how people play with this stuff, that's maybe much more interesting than what you hand something over to an established person and say, you know, hey, Jeff Koons, what do you want to do with 3D printing, baby? It would be great to see what you... He doesn't have any ideas. These people are kind of doing... There's so much more out there. I fear that things become so narrow, but then you end up with your sort of Mark Spiegler, Art Basel problem, where he's like, oh my God, there's so much to look at. Gives me a headache, and these people have only been interesting for 4 years, so, you know, so I mean, it's a very tangled thing to open up. It's very hard to acknowledge everybody. It's very hard to let new voices come in. I don't know how to do it, except as a curator to work as hard as I can to try to work with different people all the time and try to bring new faces into the conversation. I think that's my obligation as a curator.
Paul, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I do. I slightly disagree a little bit about that because, I mean, Gerhard Richter, Jeff Koons, all those people have armies of craftsmen and painters behind them, as do all people who work in the sciences. If you look at Baroque polymath or whatever, it was always a workshop. It was always a team of technicians, and it was always a collaborative effort. And I think it's not so much theory's obligation or our obligation to open it up, but maybe it's interesting that you can also see new types of artists and new collectives of artists emerging. For example, I don't know if you know Das Numen. It's a group of 4 young artists who work as a collective. They all studied with Olafur Eliasson, and they do exactly that. What they do is you can't even say if they're artists, you know? There's somehow a mix between being artists, being engineers, being coders, being soldiers.
Well, that's great that they're uncategorizable in that way.
But they make that visible, you know.
Yeah.
This is so what they produce is also not sort of an artwork that you can put in the gallery, but they transform the gallery in the working process. Maybe if there's time in the end, I can show some examples. But this is something that I find interesting. That there's maybe the artist is disappearing at all. That would be nice.
I mean, I'm guilty of this. This is something I'm thinking about right now. Is like this question of, especially since the videos that I've been making that accompany these projects oftentimes, for lack of a better word, are narratives. And then like how didactic is it for me to then kind of explain how that narrative happened, which tools I use, to the, you know, there's a process of accreditation that's important. But I think what you're talking about is incredibly important when the artist becomes a magician, in the same way that Apple is a magician, in the same way that all of these sort of liberating elements are promised to you, and these freedoms that all of these new things will bring, but you don't know what's actually inside your computer, which now Apple has actually made screws where it's impossible for you to find out what's inside your computer. And as an artist, if you're dealing with these things, how do you skirt that line so that you're not just mirroring all the bad shit that's happening, but without becoming didactic and pointing to the thing and saying, see, hear what I'm doing, it's very bad, you know, and also having confidence and faith in the audience that they can handle these things, that they can take on this mass of information and start to parse out. I mean, this is also an artist like Simon Denny, this is his entire practice. Is providing access to these things that have been obscured. And it's interesting to see how different artists kind of deal with that, yeah.
And Hans, I also saw you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I completely disagree with a lot of things you said, but it was a wonderful presentation. I laughed my ass off. But I do think that we need, there is a dire need of geniuses. And I think I started off with e-toy. It was the most extreme form of dehumanization and de-identification. Same outlook, like we looked like skinheads. We were like a cult. So we completely stripped off our personality. We tried to, and we failed. It was successful, but we failed in a way. And I hated all these genius. It was the enemy, the genius artist. And now today, 20 years later, I'm in a completely different place. I say, fuck no, we need it. We live in a neo-Biedermeier time. I mean, look at the stuff. Look at Mark Spiegler. I mean, it's amazing. Go to Art Basel. It's just 90% decorative art. My gallerist in London says, Hans, I can't sell your stuff. This is just too much. Nobody will, they don't, the English institutions won't touch your shit at the moment. They all want to have nice, good-looking, interesting stuff. We were lucky to do a really radical commission for Serpentine as well for the Extinction Marathon. But it was because it was kind of, Ben could kind of, you know, we just did it. Yeah, nobody really knew what to fucking do.
And you're talking about Ben Vickers, the digital curator.
Yeah. Exactly. But my point is, to come back to the genius, in science, in art, it always needs, and it's sad that it used to be white guys, it doesn't have to be that way, but it needs someone who takes the responsibility for the team, who says, no, we're gonna do that, it's gonna fucking fail, but we're gonna go there, and we try it out, and we do it. And that's where the real science and the real art happens.
But
that's when the breakthroughs happen, and not in teamwork where everybody's like, I'm an architect, and I work together with the sound engineer, etc. And then the creative industries come in, and that's the problem we have at the moment. Creative industries come in, all these economic bastards try to give us money and try to steer us away from art, from the actual art. I'm getting really conservative and really elitarian in a way.
I think it's a misunderstanding, actually. I don't think it's about, of course we need inspired people and we need geniuses. I think we were talking about transparency and accessibility and the concept of the genius, because the genius, as the one that you brought up, is one that becomes a genius because he hides how he did it. He's the magician. He will not let you know his trick, you know. And I think the genius that we were talking about is more a genius that you can do
and takes responsibility.
And takes responsibility.
Yeah, I think the key word is responsibility. In that respect, I think you're absolutely right. Is just this, and as an artist, always, how do you work with people, collaborate with people, so that at the end, if the thing is stupid, it's because you made a stupid decision, you know, and that you are in a position to admit that and then continue to maybe even make work about that stupid decision. Kind of a Barbara Streisand effect of like acknowledging the thing that went wrong brings more attention to it. How do you positivize that? How do you turn that back around?
So the next thing I would like to talk about is actually also something from your talk, Michelle. Namely, you threw in the term post-internet as kind of like this group of artists who are only interested, or that is only interested in the installation shot, and that is branding themselves aggressively. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And yeah, could you extrapolate?
Well, I picked a very critical quote, so that was really, yeah, okay. So, and to say only interested in the installation shot is a little deceptive. But that said, the reason why I picked that quote and the reason why I picked that from that sort of seminal article about post-internet is because I do find it interesting how that contrasts with like how artists choose to represent themselves and their work. And if it is an obsession with showing how it is installed and documenting it, making documentation of documentation, etc., then it's interesting how that's so. There are still kind of people unaccepting of that as a way of interacting with art, and it's still there's kind of. I'm just talking about my practice and as a curator and how it works. You know, I've had people say to me really disgustedly, like, kind of, "You mean you didn't see it?" You know, so it's kind of like, well, what do you mean by see it? What is there to see? How am I supposed to see it? Well, how do you know? Boris Groys again in a great interview said it's about mentioned and not mentioned, what you're allowed to skip and not skip. And there's this kind of professional, there's these professional boundaries. Like you kind of, whisper to each other, is it okay to skip Documenta? No, it's not okay to skip Documenta. We all have to go to is it okay to skip Venice this year? Yes, it's really bad. You can skip it. Oh, good, okay. So there's this kind of like, it's a sort of loose mafia-esque kind of like what you're allowed to know about and not know about and how you access that knowing.
So, but then the installation shot is actually a way of dealing with the abundance of events and content, and it's actually, but then it actually works, right? Then it's actually something that is needed to kind of like to make sense of all of it that happens and nobody can see in person. So it's
I think so. I think it has a utility, definitely. I think it has a utility. I think it's more like Brian in that piece was being very critical about how, not to try to speak for him, but I think was trying to be critical about how it ends up being all advertising and no substance. It can feel that way. It can feel like it's an obsession with the kind of 2D surface. So
yeah, I wonder, maybe we can relate back to the notion of this new objectivity that you brought in, and maybe you can relate that to the documentation.
Well, I sort of. I don't think it's about the one installation shot, because of course there can be sort of a setting to produce this installation shot, and many of those artists we're talking about do that. But what I found interesting, also talking about going to Venice, and I missed my flight just last weekend, so I haven't been yet. So no, it's the amount of installation shots. So what's created actually is an interpolation of millions of installation shots that you can see like on your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed, which actually creates sort of like a 3D scanning already, So it becomes a certain object in a way already, And I think it's not just about this one singular installation shot that puts kind of an interface between you and the actual installation, but it's something that then gets algorithmically but also socially recontextualized through the way that you see other people seeing it that are part of your social circle or social media circle.
I also want to make another quick point about accessibility. And I think it's kind of interesting that, it's so denigrated, this idea of like learning about something through documentation or experiencing something in this kind of second, third-hand way. But I mean, I've been to, and I think we all have been to, maybe parts of the world that are so, it's just not feasible for some people to leave their country, to even get a visa to leave, to go to see and experience in the way that we deem proper. I've talked to students at a university that was in a country where it was so poor they didn't have access to the journals. It was like, so everything they're getting it through these online repositories like arg.org and stuff. I mean, so it's arrogant and kind of first world to say, well, you didn't go to Venice. It's somehow this is how the majority world will view it. So,
Cécile, use it.
Yeah, I was just going to say exactly that. Basically, is like what we have to define which audience we're talking about, and also acknowledge that there's another audience. And also, I think something that very rarely gets talked about, but gets thrown in everyone's faces by Art Basel, Frieze, and the lot, is that attendance is 60 to 70,000 people. These are not just art world people. Like my mom and her friends go to Miami Art Basel, and they have I can tell you because they have no idea what I do, and don't care. But they go to this as an event, and I think this is the audience that I'm excited about, And I think even more than like showing in a museum or things like that, people will go to these things. And you just have to hope. Maybe it's naive if you create an environment. And sure, the installation shot that I showed was from Frieze. And I did, feel a bit stupid spending all this time making this installation when there was a Jeff Koons piece, like, two stalls away. But people sat, they still watched the video. Like, I think there can be a faith in an audience that is not ours.
Hans.
That's a tricky thing, because when you asked me first about the early works, the actionist stuff, the media hackings, with Vote Auction, we reached 500 million people. We had thousands and thousands of users writing us, death threats, questions, everything. And then during the course of a career, you end up in this. I used to be a big fan of Maurizio Cattelan. Today I think it's fucking shit. It's like, it's just self-referential bullshit in the end. It's just within, and the problem is the moment you start to work with the galleries and you start to you work with the institutions that are basically this hermetic, they just, yeah, it's the same people. Yeah, they just tour in the summer. They go to Document and the Venice Biennale, Art Basel, etc., etc. It's horrible.
I think this can be redirected, though. I think not all artists have to do this. Let's also kind of say that, there are people who are not interested in this, and that is also okay. It's just a different, that is a different career, and that's a person's choice. But I think artists are in a position to redirect this. It's harder, it's slower, you make a lot less money, but I think then maybe I don't know, I'm not there yet, but I'm hoping that the payoff then is...
I was never interested in the user. I was never interested, I don't care about you. I don't care, I've never been. And the problem is only, it's not interesting anymore. If you have to deal with a self-referential system, my curiosity just goes dead. So that's why Übermorgen, we have started to play professionally online poker. It's like, I saw Duchamp playing chess, I thought he went into chess, so I love poker, and Liz is really, really good in poker, yeah? So she did these quiz shows, and she won a lot of money, Wer wird Millionär and shit like that. We're gonna turn into an artwork, because it's been out and like 10 million people have seen it. It's amazing, it's great. Yeah, but the other stuff, it's for me, it's dead.
But Hans, can I ask
but
you
the
then?
problem is, the economical problem. How can I make money? I have to sustain a family, and also, I want to have a reward. I don't have to be famous, but I want to be, in a way. I want your, like appreciation in a way. Even I don't care, but I want it anyway. It's weird.
I care for you.
But this was a basic link that we started to make yesterday, listening to the panels that were about performance, and saying that there are so many parallels. And the biggest one is and not to harp on this so much, but just human labor. I mean, this anecdote that was tossed out about the performance that was acquired by an institution, and the institution will probably never show it because then they have already bought the work, but then they have to pay for the people to come in and do it. And this is something that you face when people, and there are so many invitations now to make digital works, this assumption that it's going to be fast, easy, and cheap. And it is the exact opposite. It's funny because only now video, and maybe sometimes because I send them the budgets, just like to scare people off. And the budgets are not, let's get in this crazy set, or no, it's the people who are working, who are, and their hours and their manpower. And I definitely don't have an answer to that. I mean, I think but it is something that keeps coming up over and over again. And at the center of it is just people have to live.
So at this point, I would like to open the discussion up to you. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. That's not a problem. Then we just continue a bit.
Can I quickly reply? Yeah. That was a point I was also thinking about preparing this panel. That talking about the ideology between the physical and the immaterial or the digital, where I thought, but we use so much energy and so much working time and so much technology and know-how and people to produce work. There's no difference to Jeff Koons piece.
Immaterial labor doesn't exist. While I'm
matter.
Working, I still have to eat. I still have a body. My brain is connected to my body. It is an organ. It's not.
Sure.
But it's not appreciated. So I don't know how it is for you, but basically the budgets are cut so low that the wage, the fee is cut out of most production.
Well, or you're asked to choose between taking a fee and putting that money towards the project, which is awful because it's like, do you want to be okay as a person, or do you want your work to be better?
Something else that I also wanted to depart from your talk was the kitchen sink approach that you detected in lots of contemporary exhibitions in just throwing out objects. How do you think that relates to our situation with regards to digital technologies, to the internet? what is the relationship here?
Well, I think it's interesting that now, like, there's artists with GitHub accounts, and like people are interested in sharing their, sharing how they did it. Like, it's like the anti-magician, saying like, this is how I did it, so you can do it too. And in a way, I think the curatorial kitchen sink approach was meant to be almost a similar gesture, like kind of like, here's what I was thinking about when I came up with Documenta, whatever, which is interesting. Though, again, to go back to this idea that there's so much stuff to get through, there's so much there's so much to see. Is it egotistical of the curator? Like, is it that interesting to people to kind of go, here's what I was thinking about? I mean, you've already got a giant exhibition full of artworks to see. Do I really need to spend time looking at what you were thinking about? I mean, so I find it sometimes can be a bit hard on the audience because you've already got an impossible to see thing in its entirety. But that's maybe also part of it, is that there's these things that are impossible to see in their entirety, then there retains this kind of wonderful mystery, and it's also, it's unknowable by any one person except perhaps the curator or a handful of the artists that were involved, which is nice.
Yeah, or also just for there to be big gaping holes. I'm 100% sure that there are very few people who've seen all the different iterations of a project like Agnes, just like for you and these larger evolving things, there are very few people who are able to or want to follow from beginning to end. And then how do you conceive of that as a realistic thing, and how do you even make that something positive?
That positive, that there are several different ways of approaching or several different ways of experiencing.
It's also accepting that people will have certain opinions about your work and interpretations of it that are just not what you intended. And like you said, I mean, I guess it's just like, yeah, fuck it, sure, that's yours now.
But we're hardwiring now blind spots into things, which is interesting because I find this. So an artist was telling me the other day that this Chinese factory that makes drones was contacted by the White House and said, you cannot let someone fly a drone over the White House. Like, you have to hardwire this into the chip. You cannot do it.
That's what I was going to say. I think you should phrase it the other way around. The blind spots are wired into us.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like when we're talking about unknowability and things, it's like also part of the tool that it absolutely shapes what's possible. So, but you buy this in the store and it's essentially a defective drone because it cannot do something. You imagine when you buy it, great, I'm going to fly this over the White House, and then you buy it and it won't go there. And I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, you imagine that's probably a pretty rare occurrence, but...
Be a beautiful performance.
Trying to get it to go there, and it won't go. But that's essentially, I mean, there's a long history of that, actually, of course, in all technologies. Like, we build in the blind spots.
Functional dysfunctionality.
Functional dysfunctionality.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, just so that it's not like so like doom, negative. I do think that funding structures are changing because of the work that artists are making, and like obviously there are great institutions that listen to the people that they want to work with, and then that in and of itself, like the way that those processes change, I think is hopefully setting things up for the future.
Sure, and when we heard the talks yesterday about how performance slowly crept into the institutions, that's actually a very similar process. And it just takes a while, I guess. And discourse is always, and the other thing that strikes me as peculiar or noteworthy is kind of that discourses evolve, of course, a lot faster than the institutions can adapt. So oftentimes that makes them look a little bit stupid, but the intentions are good. And with that, if there are no further questions, I think we ran out of time.
Maybe I can say one more thing, but this relates to the coffee break, because I've been talking about privacy and cryptology. So if anyone is interested in learning how to encrypt email or access the darknet or become anonymous on the internet, I can teach you that in 10 minutes during coffee.
Great. Thank you. And thanks to all the panelists for your wonderful presentations.